All right. It has been some time since we did our Division Manhunt video, and this week we're looking at the third bounty target for this season. This dude's name is Cursed, and he thinks he is cursed. And he's got a very funny, kind of goofy backstory, but the gist of it is he's a big, heavy dude with a big chain gun, and he's yet another target that we have to take down on our way to Stovepipe. This time, the fight will take us through the tidal basin. I gotta say, before you begin watching this video, or I guess as you are, because I've been talking now for about 30 seconds, this is absolutely not the best gameplay. Far from it, actually. I get knocked way more than I should, and I do some really dumb things, but I did get through it with the help of some randos. I always try to find a max party of 4 people to help me. I feel like in these manhunts, the difficulty swings wildly, and I want all the help I can get. So this was under the challenging difficulty, which if you look back at my other videos leading up to this, they were insanely hard. Then they started to get easier again, and now this one to me felt insanely hard. You're going to find a lot of really high-powered yellow elites that have pretty much one-shot kill status, at least in my opinion. And I think I'm pretty well geared at this point. But I just find myself getting hung out to dry way more than I should. The other problem with this particular map, in my opinion, is Tidal Basin. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very large domed area, and it like sinks inward in such a way that almost the entire terrain around you is higher ground. And what ultimately happens in this area is it's very easy to get pinned down at range. And if you don't have a sniper rifle, which I don't really like to snipe anyway, this makes it incredibly hard because you're always going to be looking up at enemies who are going to be on structures above you, farther away in the distance with lots of cover. You're going to find lots of drones that kind of patrol around, and some of those really nasty black tusk robots that are just total bullet sponges. And then you're going to find a lot of enemies who throw status effect things at you, whether it be smoke or electricity or grenades that will impact your combat as well. And there's a lot of times here, and you'll see it in this gameplay, where the team and I almost get entirely pinned down, and it looks like we're on the ropes until we're able to kind of just organically focus fire down a single target in order to destroy them. But leading up to that, at times, it is insanely punishing because the enemies just don't seem to stop coming. And you'll see at the end, too, and I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get there, when Cursed shows up, it gets even more insane. So here's the first of many deaths I'm going to have. But I will say, before I jump into some of the other stuff I want to talk about today, this was definitely one of the hardest manhunts that I've done in a while. And for all the aforementioned reasons that I said, but just, this is definitely not one, like if you're just getting back into Division 2, this is definitely not the manhunt you probably want to start at. This one requires a lot of movement. You're not going to be able to just basically camp and kind of hang out in one area. You're going to have to constantly be moving around because of all of the airstrikes that are going to come your way. And you have to be aggressive at times because enemies, due to the large size of the map, have this really nasty ability to essentially turtle up in far corners of the map and put down status buffs for themselves, like healing, or the one that gives them more damage, like that red, like rage area. And if you are not able to go in and burn down those items, you will just not have the damage to burn an enemy down, and you will run out of ammo. More than one time on this, I was resorting to my shotgun, which was my secondary, because I just ran out of ammo. And after shooting round after round after round of enemies, and they still continue to come, even with 4 players in this, it got very, very nasty. So as I am talking through this other news, just keep that in mind. This was definitely one of the more challenging ones that I've done. So the other part of the news and what I wanted to talk about, and I feel like this is a good time because this is going to be a pretty long video today as I play through this manhunt with you guys, is that we had our Division 2 day about a week and a half ago now. And they announced that they are including a lot of new features in Year 5, which is really, really cool. including some new game modes and some more story DLC. Now, you could argue with the story DLC part that The Division has been trying to limp the story along through these manhunts, and I think you do get a very, very small snippet of kind of what is going on in the larger Division universe. But reality is, a lot of the characters that we play with day to day don't really get a lot of story time anymore. They're just kind of support characters. They may lightly react to some of the targets that you're taking down in the manhunt, but largely the kind of major story beats have really stalled out. And I could think of the only real push we've seen in a story, honestly, is when Lewis kind of joins our group maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago, where he kind of like defects to join you and he starts to help out a little bit. Short of that, we haven't really seen anything that's like, oh, wow, this is a very interesting story element. Definitely nothing like we saw in Division 2, Vanilla, or in Warlords of New York, where you had a lot of story there, a lot of motivation, a lot of cutscenes, character exposition, etc. So we've been missing out on that story piece for a long time. I'm glad they're doing something, and I'm glad that Year 5 is finally bringing that something. So Year 5 is going to be, I assume the end of Division 2. I don't know. This game just seems to continue to get more life and more traction, and despite, it being an older game, it still plays really well. The 60 frame per second patch made it a lot more fun to play on next-gen consoles. And it's, Warlords of New York is very, very accessible. It's very cheap right now to dive in, and there's always something going on. Even if it's just cosmetic-based, there's always some sort of story mission or event going on, whether it's a crossover with Resident Evil, or it's the various manhunt leagues that they have you do, or trying to get into the raids, or checking out Tower, or the Summit, rather. There's always something in this game that kind of presses it and keeps it going, which I like. But I feel like we can all agree that the game could definitely either use a major fresh coat of paint or ultimately just announce that they're going into maintenance mode. Right now, I feel like we're kind of stuck in that limbo where it's like, well, the game is fun, and they are drip feeding us new content, but it's not something I log into every day. So I'll log into the Division and I'll play, I'll do the manhunt, and then I log out. That's why if you've watched some of my last manhunt videos, my shade level hasn't really skyrocketed like it used to, because there's really not a whole lot to do other than getting those god rolls on pieces of gear. I'm pretty happy with the kit I have. I guess I could go back and grind out some of the specialization weapons, but short of that, there's not a ton left to do. Year 5 is supposed to fix that. So they're adding a new game mode that they're calling Descent. And it's being billed as a roguelike game, which instantly caught my attention because to me, that is the best genre of any game. And when I think about like a Division crossing over with a roguelike game, the first thing that I think about is, okay, you're basically going to start in a, very, very difficult setting. You're going to scavenge for guns and kind of work your way up through the progression. The problem with the Division 2 is that that core gameplay mechanic doesn't fit in with roguelite at all, which is why I'm really excited. I mean, think of the Division 2, or even the Division, it doesn't matter. It's, usually a very large, bursty firefight in which you get a permanent residence that you could begin to build up, whether it's taking on missions for settlers or whether it is doing some of the side content, and you kind of build up that sphere of influence very slowly but very steadily as you progress out into more and more components of the game. A roguelike, obviously, very, very different. You're going to have lots of shorter duration runs, typically that are going to end because you're just not quite there yet. And as you die and kind of restart, you're going to get more and more perks and everything. And that's not really something you see in the Division 2, perks in particular, until very, very late game when you get your Shade Watch. And even then, your perks or your bonuses are such a small percentage of your overall character build. It's just kind of a nice to have at that point instead of an absolute necessity. So I'm really curious to see if they can pull this off. It looks interesting on paper. I believe that if you are a member of the public test server, it's actually already gone live as of last week, where the public can jump in and play. And there's probably videos like checking it out. I don't really want to do beta testing anymore unless I get paid for it. That's something that I've been fortunate enough to like get myself into in the last few years. So I'm not really interested in checking it out until it's official. But it will be launching, I believe, later in, I want to say June. where you're going to actually be able to play that mode for real. So I'll let the beta testers go through and do anything that they want, and then after that's done, I'll kind of play it afterwards. So what is Year 5 include? Well, as I mentioned, it's going to include Descent mode, which is, I think, the big thrust right now for something new to do. I don't know, there's a lot of speculation on what this mode could or couldn't be. I've played a lot of roguelites. There's some really good ones. There's some really bad ones. I hope that Ubisoft does plagiarize the good ones so that it's fun and challenging. And I would love to see, crossplay finally be enabled in this. I doubt that's going to happen. No mention of that, actually, but one can hope, right? Anyways, that first segment of Year 5 is going to be called Broken Wings, which includes the Descent mode and part of the castle rebuild. You've probably noticed that this season of the Manhunt, the castle has become kind of the hub as you're working with Wally. And I don't even know how Wally fits into the story anyway. Honestly, it's kind of a weird NPC that just basically came out of nowhere. Up until now, we've been dealing pretty much with Manny Ortega and, the White House as the forward base of operations. For some reason, the game has shifted into the castle, and now Wally has been giving us intel on kind of what targets we need to take out as part of the Manhunt. So this hopefully will give us a little bit more clarity on kind of what that is all about. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. The castle area in of itself has never been that exciting. I think a lot of people go through that settlement very quickly because there's not really a ton to do there. Maybe you do some of the harvesting missions or whatever, where you're bringing materials and supplies in. But short of that, I don't think many people look at the castle as like one of these really cool hubs. So Season 1 and Season 2, also, which is Season 2 is called The Puppeteers, will include this castle rebuild event. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of shapes up. Season 3 and 4 is where I think it gets a little bit more interesting. Season 3 is called Vanguard. That includes a Back to New York event. So something with the Warlords of New York, something wasn't quite done there. I always thought it was really cool playing the Division 2 and going back to kind of the streets, at least some of the streets of the Division 1, just to go through some of those areas again to see how different it is. And it looks so much better now, especially for me, jumping from Xbox 360 where I played that over to PlayStation 5. Like, such a leap in performance and quality and draw distance and reflections and HDR and all that wonderful stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what the Back to New York actually entails. I assume we'll be doing a manhunt, but out there, as opposed to most of the manhunts that have been focused around the Washington, D.C. area. And then Season 4, Black Diamond, wraps up with that story DLC. And that is where I think it's going to be pretty interesting. So the story DLC, which a whole lot of it isn't really known quite yet, will add new zones, new main missions, and an entirely revamped endgame structure. So right now, the zones, there are a ton of them. You just got to open up your map and look at all of the ancillary things to do, excluding even Warlords of New York. All those activities you see, not just in the main event with all the not just on the main map, rather, with all those side missions, but all of those zones across the top and the bottom of the map, like the zoo and the power plant, and obviously getting into some of more of the raid stuff. And you got the college that you can go to that has 3 different forks in it that you have to work your way through. This game has never been short on content, and it continues to add more. So I think we're all excited for new stuff because if you're like me, you kind of have gotten burnt out on that. But there's still a lot to chew into. We're just going to have even more. So I'm excited for whatever those zones will be. We're finally going to get some new main missions. And when I read into that, and I want to believe a new main mission is actually going to mean full CGI and voice acted, not just the voiceover stuff that we've been getting right now in the manhunts, but something a little bit more proper. Maybe some more dialogue or explanation. Maybe we'll finally figure out what's going on with kind of the big bad of this game and maybe finally take her down and get some clarity on that. There's a lot of possibilities. It could be a lot of speculation in the direction that this game will go. But I think it's clear that the game is kind of reaching that endpoint. A lot of characters, and you even see them here in the game, are into the thousands, if not tens of thousands in the shade level. Something new to do story-wise would be great, which leads me into the whole new endgame structure. It was very interesting to see what could they be bringing there. And what does that look like? Are we, I assume a lot of the tech we've already done will probably continue, but I will even say, as somebody who's definitely on the lower end of the end game stuff, hitting that shade level 85, I can tell you that right now, as I play through it, it kind of feels very samey, and I'm not really being rewarded for doing anything anymore. I'm getting that one shade point that I'm putting into my my watch that's giving me like 0.001 damage or like one extra bullet in my reserves. It doesn't really feel like menacing. And I get it, I'm end game. Like, I wouldn't expect these massive overhauls at this point now. So I'm curious what that entails, because as you're seeing, as we're, kind of comparing and contrasting right now to what's going on with this this Manhunt right now with Cursed, it's hard, If they make the game even harder than this, are they going to alienate players like me? Or are they going to do what a lot of other games do and have this massive jump forward in which you basically just leapfrog through like tons of content, and the very first like the very first quest item you get is going to be 10 times better than the highest raid piece of gear. Warcraft is notorious for doing this, by the way. Warcraft does this all the time, where you can grind and grind and grind, and the day a new expansion or a new patch comes out, everything you did is basically null and void. There's that opportunity, and I think that might be good to kind of catch some of the other players up, because you do find these power vacuums where it isn't as fun. I mean, yes, it's cool to have people to play with for sure on this, but like, I can guarantee you the guy that's like shade level 10,000 is never in risk of doing this run as a way like me getting knocked all the time as a lowly shade level 85. And even the guy who's lower than me, you can see how many times we just get melted. Again, could be due to some poor decisions, but the reality is it's just damage checks at this point. And I don't know how you're really rewarding players who are still continuing to try to enjoy some of the new content when you're making that so hard. So I'll be really curious to see what that story DLC and that whole endgame structure combine to do. Maybe we'll get some new guns. Maybe we'll get some new specializations. Maybe we'll get a new way of how we level our character. All these things are great, but it all does really kind of lead to that the Division 2 is definitely starting to reach kind of like the twilight of its, and I'm shocked they're still doing new stuff. I just wish they'd release Division 3 at this point. Put it on a newer engine, give us better lighting effects, get us better particle effects, allow us to have the 120 FPS frame mode, take advantage of some of the new haptic feedback in the Xbox Elite Controller Series 2 or the DualSense controller, give us 3D audio support, give us crossplay, give us cross progression. These are all things that like are standard by today's industry, but when the Division 2 came out, these things didn't exist, but they do now. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of where where that goes. And I'm excited for, them continuing to support it, but no news about Division 3. That does worry me. It does worry me that right now we are in a place where the Division is kind of reaching its end, and we're not really getting into anything fun or new or exciting. And that I'm hoping that the Season 5 stuff fixes that. Because honestly, if you look at the last few roadmaps, even when they brought back the game after it kind of went stagnant, they're like, hey, we're going to start doing roadmaps again because Heartland didn't really pan out and we need to kind of go back to our fan base in Division 2. And they kind of like revitalized the game at that point. Even if you go back and look at the seasons, content has been very spread out. Like, we got the Summit, which was really, really cool. And then we didn't get anything for a long time. We haven't had any overhauls to the Dark Zone. We haven't had any overhauls to any of the raids lately. We haven't had any new, hard or fun endgame content that challenged players. And I just got through playing the Modern Warfare 2 raid and just how different that game was when it was designed with like platforming and puzzle solving, as opposed to something like the Division where it's always been the same for so long. I think Ubisoft could really learn a thing or two from how that is kind of panned out, and we'll have to see what happens with that. So back to the Chunks raid, as I'm still playing through this, I'm trying to keep the whole video uncut. You could see the whole thing. This is a very long one, and I think this is a really good example of why this game does need some new sort of mechanics or progression or something that I'm hoping that maybe the story DLC or they can borrow from the descent mode will bring into the game. Because this turns into basically standing right in front of an enemy and burning them down as they burn you down. And you can see the health bars are getting longer and longer, and the damage that an enemy take is getting harder and harder. Everybody's basically reverted to this point in the meta now, in my opinion at least. Almost everybody's using a riot shield just because it's so much better to tank. And you basically just have your teammates stand over your shoulders. I still do use my minigun. I'll bust it out here a little bit later. Although the damage just isn't keeping up with the enemies anymore. And especially with all of the perks that I'm getting in my set, with, you know, the bonus to assault damage or headshot damage, or the way that my gun works, where I'm getting these damage boosters. Unfortunately, the heavy weapons are kind of taking a back seat, with the exception of the shield. I guess if you're like really still into sniping, the sniper rifle would probably be one that maybe some people still want to dabble with. But for the most part, the game has gotten to this point where they just keep adding more and more zeros to enemy health pools. And unfortunately, you're just kind of getting burnt out on how you have to burn things down. And I think that's something that's frustrating as well. They did mention one other thing, I should say, that going back to the roadmap, one other thing that they had mentioned is they were aware that manhunts have gotten slightly stale, and we're going to see what they called a new twist. They didn't really specify what those twists would be or how that would actually work out, but we will be seeing something different in manhunts going forward. Up until now, every manhunt has followed the exact same pattern with the exception of Corporal Lewis. Every manhunt has been 4 targets that have to be systematically taken out by doing missions in those zones, whether it's bounties or hostage rescues or control points or whatever. Those always unlock the final bounty that you select and take out one of the 4 targets, after which you've taken out all 4 targets. The 5th final target, the real target, will appear. You'll defeat them in battle, and the manhunt is over. And this has been going on forever, with the exception of Lewis, who does defect and join your group at the end, which is kind of interesting. So you have a little different than the traditional, like, kill bad guy and wait, and, you know, the world is saved kind of thing. So I'm not really sure what the new twist will be. Hopefully it's something fresh, because I gotta admit, and I still enjoy the mechanics of this game, and I still enjoy playing it, but I gotta admit, we're reaching definitely a point in this game where it is very samey. So that was the big announcements that they had for Division 2. They also are still pushing this dopey mobile game, which nobody cares about. I don't think anybody wants to play older versions of Division on their phone. And I think the jury's still really out on Heartland. I did a video on it some time ago when I got into the beta for it, and I spent some time playing with it. I definitely was not impressed. I think a lot of people are not impressed, and I think that's one of the reasons why this game has kind of taken a while to mature, and it's taken a while for us to actually see it again. And I also think that's why they brought back so much stuff from the Division 2, is because they don't want to lose that Division fan base, but they're not quite ready to go to the next thing yet. I keep hoping for Division 3, specifically a proper paid sequel, as opposed to a free-to-play model with Heartland, because I can already tell the nickel and diming from Ubisoft is really bad. I mean, these are the guys that, if recall, charged double or charged an extra $10 in their Assassin's Creed games to give you double experience just so you didn't have to grind. I noticed that on Odyssey, and that was something that absolutely turned me off for that game, where you had to basically buy those Helix credits to get enough experience, or to get enough Helix credit points where you could buy this expansion content, or this enhancement content, which allows you to double your experience. I'm just afraid that Heartland is going to go that way. And one of the things that I think has been charming about the Division, whether you're burning out on it like I am or somebody who plays, is at least, you know, while the rewards themselves don't feel that great level to level, as a holistic looking back on it, you know, a guy with a shade level 1,000 versus a guy with a shade level like 10, you will see night and day in terms of the equipment and the kit and how they play and the passive perks and all that stuff that is included in their gameplay. And I feel like when you go into a Division Heartland model where you're going to start doing this DLC, I think it may start to result into a pay to win, and it's going to kind of take away some of the charm of seeing characters work their way up. Like storking a bunch of money to get, really cool pieces of gear is fun. And signing in and doing those hard challenges to get different pieces of armor from the crossover event, whether it be from Resident Evil or some of the other franchises, right? That's all cool. I'm just afraid that Heartland is going to kind of take that pay-to-win mentality, and we might lose some of that charm of the game. So, back to the raid, as we're getting close to the end of this video now, finally. We did finally reach Cursed. Again, as I said, the big criticism of this entire area remains here. It's a giant, bowl or inverted dome in which all the walls on the outside are higher. Enemies are spawning in from every single direction, including mechanized dogs and turrets, and these guys hit like trucks. Lots and lots of crossfire. Since they're so hard to defeat, everybody, unless they're very well coordinated, which in this pickup group we are not, but unless you're very well coordinated, everybody is spread out and scattered to the wind. So everybody's having these one-on-one skirmishes as opposed to everybody kind of huddling together and focus firing down enemies. And as a result, you have a lot of enemies that have like a quarter health that just don't die. And then eventually they all die in very, very rapid succession. You do a bunch of damage to the boss. Usually they have a voice line or two of like, oh, you hurt me, or oh, I'm weak, or whatever. And then they get all their health back, rinse and repeat. And this is one of those levels where that happens. Every time we finally get close to the boss, he is usually summoning more reinforcements, and then he drives back. And it's kind of difficult because you're trying to fight, but you can't get to the boss. I mean, I am pinned down by no less than 3 or 4, yellow elite characters right now, seemingly alone. I do have some teammates, up and to the left of me, but they're focusing on something different. So basically all I can do is peek up, do a couple shots, and then, get knocked or sniped, which happens again and again and again. I think this is my last knock. There might be one more after this, but we're getting close to the end now where we're kind of starting to chew away at some of those enemies. Although you can see that it's still kind of rough. I'm low on ammo. We're not really making a major push when it comes down to taking out some of these enemies. You still got these nasty sniper drones and sniper dudes around here. Sometimes like that, it's a gift from the kitchen, so to speak. The AI bugs out and allows us to get a quick kill on there, but still not really able to get over to Cursed. I think he kind of goes out of position here, and I think that's maybe why this fight ended 5 minutes earlier than it should have, because he pushes really, really, really aggressively onto the side. And once I take out this dog, there's really nobody behind him that puts up much of a fight. So we can basically flank him, and that's exactly how it happens. And you can see I've reverted to shotgun because I'm completely out of ammunition again. I'm running around. I actually wanted to get on that mounted turret, but he kind of gets out of position. Had he been on that mounted turret, I might have snuck over to try to actually take him out. But yeah, we're starting to tease the idea of peeking over there. I definitely back off quickly because I don't want to keep dying. But you can see that, we're starting to limp away, and Cursed is out of position. So this fight's going to be coming to an end here soon. As I wrap up this video, I'm excited for everything. I hope this doesn't come off as overly negative with the Division 2. This happens with all games that have a long shelf life. Heroes of the Storm, Master Chief Collection, just to name a few of games that I still play that just have really not a whole lot left to do in them. You just keep wanting more and hoping for more. And as a fan who enjoys the content, enjoys the gameplay, seeing that a new season was announced, hopefully it's not just more of the same. Hopefully it's not just more of the same weapon caches or the same, apparel caches that we've seen time and time again, but genuinely something different. That's why I'm really so excited for the Descent mode, and I'm really excited for the story DLC. I'm hoping we can push the story and push some of the gameplay in a new perspective to kind of liven it up. It's hard to kind of recommend this game at this point for a new player, because you'd be so overwhelmed with what to do and you'd be so behind on content, especially wanting to jump into this end game stuff, that you just wouldn't be ready. But for everybody else who is just still a huge fan of the Division like me and, does log in to play the raids, well, at least we're getting more of it. It's not like they pulled what they did on Ghost Recon, where they left the game to die. So that part's at least kind of interesting. But that wraps up this video on taking out Cursed. We're final push here. I'll let the game speak for itself as we kind of burn them down and check loot. By the way, I didn't get anything that great. I hope you find these manhunt videos informative. They're long because they don't cut anything out. It's not that it necessarily acts as a walkthrough, but it's just something that I want to show in its entirety to show you that, yes, this game still does have some challenge to it. And yes, playing in a good cover-based system and a tactical shooter is still rewarding, especially when we're able to burn these enemies down and get, you know, mediocre gear. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.
Agent endorsement. Just decrypted another drone recording. Meet me at the castle.